This is episode 263 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. And now a word from our sponsor, Control and Compound.
Infinite banking in under 60 seconds. We've all got to save our money somewhere, and we think that a high cash value life insurance policy is the perfect place to save it. Why? We're going to save our money inside this policy, and it's going to grow tax-free. Down the road, we're going to get hit with an emergency or an opportunity, maybe a chance to buy a business, real estate property, an income producing asset. And instead of withdrawing from our savings account, we're going to leverage that asset. We're going to borrow the insurance company's money and we're going to invest in that opportunity. Our money is still inside of that policy, compounding, uninterrupted, tax-free, and our money's outside in this investment opportunity. We're going to rinse and repeat, all while providing a death benefit for our families. Down the road, we're going to retire. Now we retire with a high cash value life insurance policy with a lot of cash. We're going to start taking those policy loans again, but this time we're never going to pay them back. When I say never, I mean we're going to pay them back with the death benefit when we die, and our families are going to get left with the rest completely tax-free.
For more information, visit www.controlandcompound.com/Andrew Hines. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Josh Findlay back on after about a year. Josh gave some updates as to what's happening in the mortgage market and getting approvals with specific respect to multifamilies. He also talked about some projects that he's getting into. Josh is an absolute wealth of knowledge and he hasn't been at it all that long. He's just clearly a very hard worker and he really seems to know his stuff. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Just before we jump in, I want to remind you that if some of the concepts and terminology that I'm speaking are new to you, those first 10 episodes of this podcast are really great for a foundation. Head on back and check those out and come on back up to modern episodes and I'm sure things will be a lot clearer for you. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I ask that you kindly share it with somebody else that you think it might help. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the episode with Josh Findlay. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Josh Findlay back on the show. It's been a little while, maybe about a year, I think.
Yeah, it's been a little while, yeah.
Yeah, Josh, thanks for doing this again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So, Josh, not everybody's going to be familiar with you. Not everybody's going to have heard the last episode. I know you do have a pretty big brand presence with your mortgage business, but for those who aren't familiar with you, maybe just give us the recap, what you do in real estate investing, how you got started, and what you do now.
Sure, yeah. Real estate investing journey started about 2020. My business partner and I, we got into helping people initially just with mortgages, how everybody gets into kind of the industry. You either hear somebody doing it and they're doing well, or you have an introduction and you have the opportunity to be able to shadow somebody. So that happened and we kind of stumbled upon real estate investors. We met this guy named Matt McKeever. I'm sure many of you stumbled upon real estate the same way. And stars kind of aligned and we were asked to shoot some content and that content, we decided to roll with it. And we started creating content when really there wasn't anybody creating content around different types of capital, scaling, how to do it. That information was very safeguarded. So we found out that if we give it away, people will gravitate to it. So that's how we started our business, started the Finlay mortgage team back in 2021. And here we are today. So we specifically focus on helping real estate investors, and our business has kind of grown into helping people get into and stabilize multifamily assets. So we're really focusing on the commercial side of the business now, and that has led me into purchasing multiple buildings. I think last time we spoke, I was just finishing up my first multi, but a few on the go, and team's growing. Everything's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, talk to me about this because I think last time we were speaking, things were changing. The market was already, well in decline as far as property values go. Now, I think we're kind of hitting more of a stagnant period right now. What have you seen that do to your business? How are you seeing investors adapting, changing their approach?
It was interesting to watch investors adapt in real time because realistically, if you started in 2021, you hadn't really seen a whole cycle. Like you saw COVID, which was an extreme, and then you saw after COVID, which is an extreme, and then, dealing with inflation, which is an extreme. So, watching people and investors react in real time was interesting. a lot of the pitfalls or a lot of the issues with COVID caused ramifications throughout the market. People who owned multiple single family homes or multiple properties that weren't cash flowing were starting to feel the crunch of variable rate debts. You had people who had tenants who weren't paying, and it was causing massive strain on their investments. And we saw the majority of these people get pushed out of being able to purchase real estate because asset values skyrocketed. Your income wasn't moving at the same pace as these asset values were increasing, and you just were getting essentially priced out of retail investing. And we saw the writing on the wall long before it happened and help people transition into multifamily real estate. And we saw that by taking on multiple, by taking on tenants or taking on buildings that had multiple tenants, you reduce your overall risk. If one person stops paying in a 10-unit building, it's not as much your problem as it is, the building's issue. So diversifying risk and just scalability, people decided that they wanted to get into the type of financing that didn't necessarily require their ability to be able to qualify personally. A lot of these people who are investing are business owners, and these business owners don't necessarily show $200,000 on paper, nor do they want to. So everything kind of transitioned that way.
And that's definitely a big reason why I've seen so many people doing some form of commercial investing, whether it's commercial multifamily, commercial mixed use, or just straight commercial retail, whatever. Like a lot of people shift away. That seems like it's the graduation, right? People start with a house and then they eventually graduate into this stuff because that's the way you grow. So yeah, my audience would probably be pretty familiar with that. Now, more specifically in, say, like the last year, as reality, so to speak, has set in for a lot of people. Rates are going to stay higher for a while. Prices are down and probably going to stay down compared to where they were for some time at least. So how have you seen that change? What's happened because of that?
I think it just smart money repositioned their capital a while ago. They took a look at different options in the market. So anyone who had multifamily was using CMHC debt, whether they had to, whether they were forced into it, it's another story. But a lot of smart money has been sitting on the sidelines with dry powder, looking for opportunity. And I think that right now they're taking that opportunity and they're finding properties that are either distressed from investors who can't finish projects, or their cap rates are finally expanding to the point where they can achieve like a $200,000 per door acquisition. So the numbers are starting to make sense, and the players who have the money on the sidelines are actually getting in, and we're seeing actually like a transition from retail investors purchasing these smaller properties to combining their resources together to start to take on this smaller multifamily demographic. It's interesting to watch how the price patterns and how these people are actually starting to acquire assets, because fundamentally investing in Canada is changing.
Yeah, I mean it's been turned on its head. So what used to work doesn't work anymore. It's almost the exact opposite. So just thinking about that, like you're talking people coming from, they used to buy single families and now they're buying multis, pooling their assets. How are they getting through the BRRRR process to get into that CMHC program, especially now that things have changed? So now with the MLI Select program, you got to have 2 years with an institution before you can go into it. That's if it was a construction project.
Correct.
And then, so how are you seeing people structure their deals? Like what's typical for an investor these days? Are they coming in with the cash to do the renos? Are they going with like a regular institution on a regular program as a bridge to get into the CMHC MLI Select program? Like what's the approach? What would you advise a client to do today?
It depends on your experience and your risk appetite, to be honest. There's really two ways to purchase these types of properties, and luckily we're in a buyer's market right now. You have the opportunity to request a VTB at decent terms. There are very few people who have the capital available to be able to actually execute on these transactions, considering you're looking at minimum 25% down if you're looking for a bridge product. The average mid-sized multifamily is at least $2 million in a decent market. You're looking at a decent amount of capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big barrier to enter the market. So what we're seeing is groups of 3 or 4 people who maybe had 3 or 4,
Yeah.
duplexes, triplexes, restructuring their capital on the residential side and giving them access to capital to be able to take on one of these mid-sized projects in decent markets. The key really is decent markets. So what you're doing is you're finding underperforming assets with some sort of vacancy in okay areas. You're talking like Hamilton, Kitchener, Cambridge, St. Catharines, like kind of the fringe of the GTA, where the cost per unit still makes sense, and at some point you can actually still burr projects. There's still phenomenal projects out there. It's just your risk appetite needs to be there, or your ability to be able to execute as an operator needs to be there. Can't tell you how many times I've seen people take on bridge financing and just, oh well, we couldn't, didn't work out. Like, you have to really be aggressive, and you really have to do it full time. If you're taking on a project like this isn't like a duplex conversion that you can just kind of get your contractor to go and do. Like, the people who are executing in this market are people who are doing this full time, and they're allocating a significant amount of capital to making it happen. But as you said, CMHC did throw a wrench in things. If you understand how to properly stack your capital and how to acquire, stabilize, and restructure the debt, that's going to be the differentiating factor between either executing properly or not.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned VTB as an option. I feel like that's not a great option for most institutions anyway, because they're not going to allow it. You have to be able to debt service. And most of these properties probably won't. So if you're going to go with a VTB, then you are going to go with some sort of a private bridge or a B-lender bridge to get that done. And then you're going to come back around and have that issue with the 2-year wait. Unless you can go with, like, I don't know if like an equitable trust or something will qualify as an institution for CMHC standpoint.
So there are some ways around it. Like, if you pay out the VTB in cash, so if you get like let's say an EQ first, or you get some sort of first on a bridge debt, and then you had a VTB, a small VTB in second, if you pay that VTB out throughout the term of the loan, you wouldn't necessarily trigger the 2-year requirement.
Oh, okay. So you're saying they would even care even if you had an institutional first and a VTB behind it? Because that's how you can upset a bank, right? If you're with RBC and you throw a VTB in behind them, when they do their annual review, they're going to say you're in breach of contract.
Yeah, it becomes dicey for sure. You want to make sure that the conventional NHA approved lender that you're dealing with understands that you're putting the VTB behind it. And usually, if it's flexible bridge capital to be able to, and your exit is defined, sometimes you can make it work.
Yeah, hopefully people are following along with this. So this is heavy into the commercial multifamily talk, lending structures, how to get a deal done today versus, a couple of years ago when everything was going up in value. I think people were a lot more confident to take that private money, pay the big interest rate, because they knew that the price of the real estate was going up. So they kind of felt like they were hedged in that regard. Now it's like every day matters that much more. But for me, I always felt like that way. If I'm borrowing private money, I'm like, a day of nothing happening on site used to give me an anxiety attack. I'm like, where is everybody? Get on the phone. Yeah. You can't have that. But I like how you said that. It is sort of like a full-time job. Like, a lot of people were cavalier about it. Oh, we'll get into these projects because everybody else is doing them. We'll borrow the private money because everybody else is doing it. But like, you got to take that seriously. That's a serious commitment, because those loans come due and they're looking to collect, like you're on the hook for that. So
I think that's why we've seen such a push into understanding CMHC financing. There was a massive push last June, July to beat out the benchmarks increasing and the insurance premiums increasing, and it brought a lot of investors. It brought them kind of into the fold of what CMHC is. Back in the day, your banker would maybe help a guy who had a $5 or $10 million deal do this because rates worked on the conventional side. You had 3.5% commercial debt. So, people kind of understanding how these products work is a new thing. Like, CMHC, they never dealt with 6,000 applications coming in for your $1 million, sixplex. Like, that wasn't something that was needed. So I think CMHC is also adapting to a new level of investor in Canada, starting to really understand the federal options that are out there as well.
Yeah. They've had to change everything, right? Because like you said, like everybody talks about this in my circles. Anyone who's doing multifamily, I'm scrolling on Instagram, seeing people post that they just finished this MLI Select refi on their multifamily. Boy, have things changed, from a few years ago. Like even since I started this podcast, when most people who came on were talking about just doing residential properties, sneaking it through with the bank on the residential side to, now we're moving into this space, and that's just more and more common. That's all people are really talking about. So I can imagine, CMHC is probably getting lit up with applications, which is why they did what they did, to just kind of cool things off a bit. But they're still propping up the value of real estate right now, right? Like the multifamily real estate is, because people can get 95% in a 50-year AM if they do it right. I think sellers are well aware of that and are using that to their advantage.
Without a doubt, I think you're seeing still multifamilies sell at 4.5 cap. And investors are buying it. It's even with vacancy, they're pricing in that vacant unit being at market rent because they know an investor will go in and be able to leverage the property.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing lots of demand still. Like, there is no slowdown of multifamily real estate being acquired. The guys who have the hundreds of units are making 30-day cash offers on good deals in decent areas because they know that the scalability of it is going to continue to be there as the federal government throws billions of dollars at the CMB to be able to fix the housing crisis. I think there's a lot of smart money right now is understanding where, I guess, Canada is going as a whole and the inventory situation, and multifamily real estate will continue to increase in value just due to overall demand
and lack of supply, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest single issue is, and I don't know where values go overall. Like if we're thinking housing units in general, do we think they're going to go up in the next 5 years? It's tough to say because there's all these variables, right? And then the immigration variable that just happened, they are trying to cut back on student visas, which will have a trickle down effect into a lot of other things, but doesn't change the fact that we're still way short on housing. So, what will that do in the long run? It's really tough to say, but I think, there's a lot of reason to think it makes sense to get into some multifamily, aside from having to deal with Ontario's landlord law or landlord laws. So tell me a little bit about like your outlook on Ontario, what you like, what you don't like, how you see it working. And if you have a case study, even if we can talk about something you're doing personally, let me know which way you want to take that.
Yeah, I mean, Ontario is like the golden goose of Canadian real estate. Like everybody who is invested in Ontario in the last 2 decades has made out like a bandit. And I don't necessarily think that's continuous and going to happen forever. We go through cycles. Ontario real estate as a whole, I personally invest in multifamily real estate. I think that the majority of the immigration comes into Ontario, and the demand for real estate in the GTA is massive, and if you follow the 401, people will continue to drive to qualify for decent living. So if you follow the fundamentals behind, asset value as a whole, and you look at the macro picture, I'm bullish on Ontario real estate. I think that we're going to continue to bring people into the country, and people are going to continue to want to live outside of the GTA, creating affordable, but great housing in good areas is always going to be a demand. You might not cash flow, that might be an issue, but I think if you're playing on the appreciation game, that's my bet. There's a lot of smart money going into Calgary, or has been going into Calgary for the last 2 years. If you know how to play the CMHC game, the affordable unit standard is across the country, and an affordable unit in Calgary is actually higher than what the market rent is in Calgary. So there's
really? Yeah. So, and you're talking about the MLI Select standard, like the requirement.
That's
because it's a national standard, and if you pick Calgary, it's just easier to qualify.
Anywhere in Alberta, almost. So so you can go in, and there are very more lax, I'd say, tenant laws than Ontario. And market rent is higher than, market rent is lower than what actual affordable units are classified as. So
that's a good little loophole to know. Like, what would you? Could we run the numbers on what that would look like? Like an idea? Like, what's your average rent going to be in Like,
Sure.
have you done a deal recently in Alberta that we could kind of loosely touch on numbers of?
Yeah, so I'm actually underwriting one right now. Client just picked it up. It was a condo building. There's 15 units, and these units, he actually individually purchased each one of them. Let's say
Okay.
they're like $98,000 a unit. On 15 of them, it was like $1.4 million. Market rent, the majority of them, let's say they were all 2 beds, but I think it was like 12 2 beds and 3 1 beds at $1,500, which would be market rent after renovation.
Okay, so that'll do 22,500 a month then.
Yeah. And at a
All
5.5 cap, I believe it was pushing $3 million ARV once complete. Just use a standard like 25% expense ratio.
Operating expense ratio. Yeah, hang on a second here. I will do that right now. So 25%.
And because CMHC requires, a certain percentage of your building to be classified as an affordable unit,
Yeah.
$1,500 is less than the 30% of the median renter income in the area, which I believe is $1,650. So every single one of your units would be classified as an affordable unit based off.
So you can get the 50-year AM maybe, or?
Well, I mean, so these buildings are a little bit older. I'd probably underwrite it at a 45-year AM just to be conservative. CMHC doesn't allow for any amortization under 5
Longer
years.
than useful life, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. But their rates are still under 5, right? They're like 4.5.
Yeah, the CMB's popped up a little bit, depending on the size of the loan. I mean, if you're conservative, I'd say underwrite it at 5%. You're probably around 4.75, but underwriting at 5.
Okay, so 5%. We'll just run this number right now. Okay, so first off, at a $3 million, I'm getting a 6.6 cap based on 25% operating expense ratio. Also, I did have a vacancy in there, 2%. I could cut that down, but yeah, so we're getting in that ballpark of a 7 cap at $3 million. So
realistically, you're going to be underwrite. You're going to probably get a valuation at 5.5 or a 6 cap on that too. Like when it's all.
Oh, really? Okay, so then it could be like.
It's probably higher than 3.
Yeah, like $3.5 million would be 5.7 cap. So if you're getting a $3.5 million, so if this guy bought it for 1.4, any idea what he's going to have into?
It's like 500 in run-outs. Probably like.
Yeah, so he's in for 1.9. Basically going to be getting out of the building if he gets 95%, or would that be reasonable to assume, or no?
No, he's not going to get 95. We had projected at an ETO of roughly, I want to say 2.8.
2.8. Okay, so that's like 80% loan to value ish. Yeah. Okay, so at 2.8 million, he'd be pulling 900,000 out of the deal.
Yeah, and like this is the beautiful thing of like Alberta is like the tenant laws. Now he bought all these units, but hypothetically, if you went in and just purchased a 15-unit building, the laws around being able to increase the rent to market, are much more lax than we would have in Ontario. This is why we see the majority of investors allocating their capital to places that don't have as restrictive laws. Like if you just look at the numbers, you made $1.5 million and you're able to pull out $800,000 in cash in probably less than 12 months.
That's absurd. Yeah, like what would the angle be? So he's going to go in and do like cosmetic renos to these units, like new kitchens, or is it just paint and flooring?
$25,000 to $30,000 a unit. So you're like,
so it's pretty significant reno.
Yeah, you're renovating the whole thing. You're putting a new kitchen, bathroom, floors, paint. Making them nice units.
Heat pumps in every unit, or no?
No, he's not going to do the energy efficiency requirement.
Doesn't even need to because he meets the other requirements.
That's correct.
Oh man, it's just so funny. You see people just go out and just do it.
We've seen multiple multi-million-dollar ETOs this year with our firm. Watching people acquire these assets and do it and help them do it, and watch a few $1 million land in a bank account, and it's tax-free money. You're borrowing the capital, you finish the project, you're exiting. It allows you to be able to be at such an advantage moving forward to purchase additional real estate. The key is really understanding the capital required to do it. How do you structure your debt properly to be able to execute, and understanding the fundamentals behind how to do it properly?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. So going into this deal, I mean, well, first off, what's this gentleman's time horizon going to be like? So say he just closed them all, or I don't know how long ago it was, or has he closed them yet?
Hasn't closed them yet. No, we're just.
So he went and figured out 14 different or 15 different agreements with different owners?
That's correct. Yeah, all 15 got signed. So
that's insane. Okay.
Yeah.
But moving past how insane that is, okay, so he's going to close it. How long from when he closes it to when he'll be able to get into that MLI Select program?
So there is no time frame in regards to being able to refinance. You can refinance right away if you wanted, but most likely we're looking at about a 9-month renovation because he's going to have vacancy on the building. Go in, do 9 months, and then CMHC has their application timeline down to about 60 days, 8 to 9 weeks at the moment.
Okay.
So it's drastically, reduced from what we previously have seen. So he's probably going to exit at month 12.
Okay. And is he going in with private money or an institution, a vendor take back? Like what's the approach here?
Great question. So we're going to use NHA approved lender. There's a few options available. We're going to use a bank because we're anticipating having full vacancy on the building on possession. There's going to be most likely like a 9 to 12 month IR. So you're going to have to pay the interest reserve up front for the 12 months because it's going to be like 100% vacancy in the building. But that's going to give you the ability to be able to just go and dump your CapEx on the building and restructure the debt when it's done. So it's a little bit of an upfront cost, but you're looking at prime plus 1.75 on your debt, which is sub 9% debt, which is phenomenal in today's market
for the first year. So, and I would kind of build that into the costs. Like we said, 500 in. I might throw that in at 600 just to cover the year's interest as they get it all set up, and look at that as part of the investment. But that's just wild. So how many deals are you seeing like that come across your desk? Like how many people are doing deals like this?
So purchasing all the units, it not very many, but like people acquiring multifamily buildings out west and doing this.
Like in perfect burrs that cash flow when they're done?
All the time.
All the time. Yeah. Like this one, I'm showing a cash flow at 3,700. So get a building for free, put 900 grand in your pocket, and then get $3,700 a month in cash flow.
It's the capital required to do the project. You're looking
that's it, right? So to come in,
you got to play the game, right?
So to do that project, it's 1.4 to close it. He's going to get institutional, so he just has to come in with the 25% plus closing costs, and then he needs to be able to renovate. Then he needs the 500 to renovate.
That's right.
But then he can do the deal, and then the 900 he pulls out, that allows him to do a whole bunch more on the next project.
That's correct. And this is why we've seen a massive amount of people transition and move to places where you don't have as regulated of a market. And, what's interesting, people in Ontario love to demonize, investors going out there. But, Alberta is one of the only markets that don't have as strict regulation. And they're also the lowest market rent place in the country.
Yeah.
Self-regulated markets.
Oh, I love the self-regulated market. I mean, just people, it's one of the only places you'll go and you'll see rents actually come down.
Yeah,
because it's not regulated in that sense. So people just pay market rent. Like a landlord would be dumb to just jack the rent on somebody because they'll just leave. Mm-hmm. So landlords are reasonable probably with their tenants. The tenants don't think they can play games. I bet you it's just much more pleasant to be a landlord in Alberta. I've never been, but I think it would be way better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when you talk to an investor who invests out there and you talk to an investor who is playing ball in Ontario, you got two very different conversations. It's becoming much more difficult to be able to do the same thing in Ontario. And I think what we're seeing right now is people getting out of the BRRRR model for multis just because the capital required and the risk tolerance of it just doesn't make sense anymore. The gap between legacy tenants and market rent right now is so large.
So big, yeah.
Making it almost impossible. So we're seeing people get into the development space. A lot of people who play the game for the last 2 or 3 years are looking at, how do I build purpose-built multifamily real estate? If I got to choose between tenants and I got to choose between the city, I'm going to choose the city. It's going to take me 6 months longer, but I'm going to have brand new inventory. I'm going to get market rent right away. The landlord-tenant laws aren't the same. I can keep it at market rent while I own the property. CapEx is reduced throughout the term of owning it. Most people are transitioning into the smaller development. And most municipalities are also increasing density requirements. So you can build a 10-plex right now without having to go to site plan approval.
And where does that cover? Is that just City of Toronto, or is that across Ontario now?
That's across Ontario. I think municipalities each have their own individual way of dealing with it, but
it's in force now. They all have to play ball with it now.
Yep.
Was that part of Bill 23?
Yeah.
I feel like it was. Yeah. Okay. It's been a while since I looked at that. Okay. So that's actually super handy to know. So you're seeing more people doing that. Of course, the zoning needs to be appropriate, correct? So if the zoning will support that, no site plan is needed.
Correct.
So everything less than 10 units right now, you can skip site plan.
As long as the zoning allows, that's correct. Yeah, we have a handful of clients who are looking in different municipalities. There's mixed commercial zoning allowances on in some cities that you can essentially put anything on it. And there are people who are scooping up these old Sentry Homes, chopping the back off of them, and then building 8 or 9 units off the back. And it's a quick process.
Walk me through that again. So if it's a mixed zone that allows residential or commercial.
Yep. So there's these, those kind of old dentist office and like lawyer offices, old Victorian homes. So they're in certain municipalities, they have specific zoning on them, and you can put anything on them. So
right.
If you know where to look, you can buy these places, and then what most people are doing is just chopping off the back and building a massive addition off the back and throwing the 10 units on. And you can get away with it pretty quickly. The lenders like it because it's not too small of a loan. It's also not too large of a loan. The risk appetite's there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Phenomenal.
So how many units would that be? So that'd be like almost like a commercial storefront or an office or some sort. And then you're saying like you would just match the facade and then build straight back. So just a nice clean cut across the back of the house and just carry on the building. A big addition.
And usually those properties have like large lots too because they're older lots. Mm-hmm. They facilitate enough parking and stuff too. It's interesting to watch how these new changes have come to take effect over the last 12 months.
Yeah. So to recap on that, you don't see people trying to do the BRRRRs in Ontario. Like we just went through perfect BRRRR scenarios in Alberta. Those work. You're not really seeing it happening in Ontario.
I'm doing them. There are still people doing them.
Yeah, but it requires probably a better buy price.
It does. And the type of capital you want to take on, which is institutional capital, will only play in decent markets. So you're in a situation where you have to buy in an okay market. So the cost per unit is going to be more, meaning the barrier to enter and acquire these assets is going to be more. So
what do you mean okay market? So they're not going to do rural Ontario? They're not going to do Simcoe?
Yeah, that's right. Like the appetite for these NHA approved lenders isn't necessarily...
Yeah.
They
don't want it, right?
You're pigeonholed.
Because when you talk NHA, you're talking like your Equitable Trust, is Home Trust NHA as well?
Yeah. There's a big list of them, but there isn't as many as you think that want to give bridge loans on underperforming assets. So if you're looking to execute on this, you need to understand that there are only a handful of large institutions that want to lend on underperforming assets in certain markets, and your 12-plex in Simcoe or Exeter, it's going to be more challenging, or it's going to be more expensive. So your pricing is going to be more, your cost is going to be more, all things to consider.
That's okay though if the price is a bit more on the interest. If you know your system, if you know what you're going to do. But then again, you're going into older stuff. There's tenants that they're not going to want to leave.
Yep.
Because they're paying so far under market rent that why would they? And I'm sure that you're seeing that with your clients a lot. Which
is the shift towards mid-sized development. It's almost the same amount. And CMHC has products for development as well. You're looking at 95% loan to cost, and transitioning directly into CMHC long-term debt when it's done.
Well, talk to me about that. So how do you structure that? How long's the application? So if somebody wanted to get into that kind of a process, are they going to go find something and tie it up conditionally, come to you and say, here's what I want to do? And, what's that look like from a process standpoint? How long's the application? When could they close?
Sure. Yeah. So, if you're buying just a piece of land and you don't have a site plan, odds are you're going to just close on it privately, like you normally would with a piece of land.
Okay.
You bury all your soft costs into it. You close on the deal. You get to site plan approval. Once you're at site plan, then you'd come to us and we'd structure your loan. So your 95% loan to cost includes your acquisition cost, hard costs, soft costs, carrying costs. Now, 95% sounds great and everybody tries to hold you to it, but it's important to understand that you have to qualify for the 95% of the hard costs, essentially meaning we reverse engineer your loan. So how your building or your pro forma operates on the back end of the loan, meaning the completion of the loan, will dictate the cap on how much capital CMHC is going to give you when constructing the project. Construction and purchasing with CMHC is like 60 days. You can do it pretty quickly as long as you have your site plan approval in place, permits, construction drawings, stuff like that.
Yeah. Will they give anything against the value of the land, or only on? So they'll give on the hard cost for the land too.
Yep.
But they're not going to cover any of your engineering and your site plan soft costs.
Yeah. So they'll cover all of it. But realistically, when if you're buying a piece of land, like you can't get CMHC financing if it's just land and you don't have.
Yeah, you got to close it. Now, would they have an issue if you closed it with a private mortgage and then come to them to replace it for the construction?
Nope. So there's no NHA requirements for construction.
Oh, okay. So as long as you go through it with them, no problem. Have you done one of those yet? I mean, I don't know how common that is.
Yep. We've done a few. We're working on a bunch right now as well. It is becoming more common as things get tighter. The cost of capital is definitely been an issue with most developers. They're trying to make the numbers work. They're trying to squeeze everything out of it as possible. Most of the time, these developers aren't getting the 95% just because the numbers aren't working on the back end.
And that's based on projected rents, projected end value. So not just loan to cost, but they also look at the end value.
That's correct.
Yeah. Because presumably the value is going to be more than your cost, right? You'd
hope so.
You're trying for that. Yeah. So 95% loan to cost might only end up being 75% loan to value.
It depends on the circumstance. Sometimes you see people who owned very expensive pieces of land for a long time and who went through site plan for 3 or 4 years with private debt. You're carrying cost and acquisition cost and holding it and then having to construct it as well when elevated construction costs are in play. Sometimes, it's upside down, but the cost of, if you hold it for a long time and site plan approval took a long time to do and cost you a lot of money, it could put you in a position where you could qualify for it.
Gotcha. Okay, so what are the benefits to doing this CMHC development loan? And what would be the negatives? I mean, obviously we want to touch on their process for releasing draws.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the advantages would be just cost of capital, the same as regular, capital or regular reasons why somebody would go to CMHC. Overall cost of capital and being able to acquire or recoup the majority of your costs back on a project. If you're underwriting a deal right now with a conventional lender at like 65 or 75% loan to cost, your equity injection stuck in this property is massive. And if you start running the numbers backwards, it's even worse on the back end if you're trying to go loan to value when the project is complete. So a lot of it is just like making the numbers work with developers and trying to see how much equity they got stuck in the deal. And in this environment, people are just trying to get as much out as possible.
Right. And as far as like the process goes, are you still working with one of the big A banks? They're the ones doing the draw releases and all that stuff. They're the ones servicing the loan, and it's just insured by CMHC in their program?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a handful of different lenders out there that facilitate construction loans. CMHC is just the insurer that gives the certificate of insurance on the back end, and then you would take it to a handful of different lenders depending on location, size, and strength of borrower, and what lender has an appetite for what.
Right. And then, so you have no direct interaction with CMHC in any of this process. It's all done through the lender?
It depends. So as a CMHC direct correspondence, we do, but if you were just to submit to a lender, the lender would usually take care of it.
Gotcha. Oh, so you guys do deal direct?
Yep.
Interesting. And so do you pick the lender after you get CMHC's approval?
That's correct. Yeah. So being a direct correspondent allows us to get the certificate of insurance, and then we can go shop it to, any different lender once we have the certificate. So, it allows you to be competitive on pricing. It allows you to be competitive on rates and all that stuff.
Interesting. Oh, that's handy. How did you get that set up? Is that something any broker could do, or you guys had to meet some performance metrics?
Yeah, I had to sell my soul. So my firstborn child, I had to give it away. to get it.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Okay. Anything else you could tell me about kind of what's new, what's happening, what's useful to investors right now?
Yeah. You know, multifamily real estate, I think like it's been echoed for the last few years, and it continues to echo. Don't buy something just because you have to, but opportunity is knocking, and the ones who are looking at opportunities right now are the ones that have the most dry powder on the side and who are probably tried and tested. You know, there are investors right now who unfortunately made some bad calls over the last 12 to 18 months, and there are projects that are in desperate need of some capital. And if you are opportunistic and you have the ability to be able to do it and make the right moves, I think there is a generational opportunity here to acquire something if you are looking. If not, there is a lot of uncertainty in the market. We don't know where things are going, whether or not you believe the tabloids or wherever things are going. There's still a lot of uncertainty, and there are people calling for rate hikes. There are lots of people who are calling that rates are going to drop. Nobody has a crystal ball, so we're just going to wait and see. Trust your instinct. If you do really want to understand how this works, follow different economists and understand what they're seeing and how they're going about assessing the economy.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think you need to build yourself in a buffer. Because it's exactly as you just said. No one has a crystal ball. We don't know. I have people ask me, values going up or down, and all I can say is that I see forces on both sides. So where that shakes out, I mean, there's so many variables in there that it's impossible for anybody to know. If we could know for sure, we'd all be billionaires.
I wouldn't be here. I would be on a yacht.
So tell me about what you're working on personally right now.
Sure, yeah. I got a 12-plex I just acquired in Kitchener. It was off market. Kyle Church, if anybody's dealt with Kyle, phenomenal realtor, he helped me acquire this. It was off market 12-plex. Ended up getting it for $200,000 a door, which was $2.4 million. Mm-hmm. There was 4 vacancies on possession. One of them then again left before we took possession, so 5 vacancies total. In an area in Kitchener where it's not surrounded by other multifamilies, it's surrounded by like single family homes, which I like. It's good for the overall building and like the demographic around it. And the people who were selling it, a lot like most people who deal in real estate, they were just an old Greek family, and they were getting rid of it. And they wanted to sell it and didn't want the hassle of it anymore. It needed a lot of love. It hadn't been taken care of in a while, so we ended up scooping it up. And we currently, they allowed us to go in the property before we closed, and we did 4 of the units and renovated them before we closed, so we could get our tenants in there as soon as we closed. They offered us a VTB on the property, so we took it for a few years while we wait for rates to come down.
So you're not going into the MLI Select right away on that one?
We are going to pay out the VTB in cash.
Okay. So you might go into apply for MLI Select in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. The plan is to go through MLI Select to do some of the energy efficiency upgrades required, and then move it in.
And what do you figure your average rent is right now? In factoring in, you have some legacy tenants, you have some new market tenants.
Sure. Yeah. So they're all 2-bed units. So for all the new units, they're renting it around. We thought they were going to rent around for $2,100, but we just can't seem to get the rent on it. So like roughly around $2,000 to $2,050 per unit. There's definitely been a softening in the overall rental market in the kind of the 3-story walk-ups in Kitchener recently.
Okay. So about 2,000 on those 5, and then the legacy tenants remaining. What's the average there?
I'd say like 850 to 900. Now the legacy tenants, not all of them were at $800 or $900. Like some of them were at market already. So I'd say probably. So
if you were to do an average, it'd be like what, 1,200?
Total probably like 16 for each of them.
Oh, between everything, the $2,000 ones, and so 16 across the whole building on average.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, so 16.
No, we got really lucky. So the negotiation with the seller, we were able to negotiate like a vendor take back at 4% interest only for a few years. So we were able to put ourselves in a cash flow situation, or a darn close to cash flow situation on the onset of acquiring the property.
Gotcha. So this one, you'd be like $19,200 in rent. If we just leave that 25% operating expense in there, is that still, you think, relevant, or maybe a little higher than that, 30?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit higher than that, but that's fine.
Yeah, we'll put 30 in there. So then the question is, what's the bank going to value it at? Because if we still have that 3.5 million in there from our last scenario, that's a 4.5 cap.
So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we were playing with the numbers yesterday or 2 days ago, and we were roughly around $3 million at a 5.25 cap.
Okay, yeah, I'm in similar ballpark here.
Yep.
I at 5.3 cap, it's a 3 million.
Yep.
But that's very rough numbers.
Yeah.
So if you're institutional on this, did you get an institution for your first?
I did not know it was a vendor take back at 4%.
Oh, the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
Nice. How much? 75%, 80%?
75%.
75%. Interest only?
Interest only.
4%?
4%.
Oh, wow. Well, that'll do it. Let's see.
It definitely helped with the stabilization of the asset.
I guess the only thing is I'm calculating this not on what you paid. So let's go back. Let's just type in what you paid. That 2.4 million. That is cash flowing like $7,000 a month. Does that make sense?
It's got to be pretty close. Yeah, no, this is the only building I've ever purchased that was essentially allowed us to cash flow almost on day one.
Yeah. The second you go interest only at 4%, that changes things.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the 2-year term allowed us to at least play the market again. Like, no one knows where it's going to be, but I think we'll be in a much lower interest rate environment in 2025.
Well, now you can take that money and, as units turn over, use that money to renovate them. Like, I love that kind of a buffer. That's the kind of buffer that makes real estate investing fun.
Yeah, it's a diamond in the rough, though. Finding that deal, like, right place, right time, right person.
Well, what would you have paid if that was just a normal on-market deal, you think?
200 a unit, 215, probably 215 a unit, probably a little bit more.
Okay, so not terrible.
No.
So if you're going to do that, then equals 215 times 12. So you would have been 2.58. So you got it for about 180 under.
Yeah.
I think the big thing here is the VTB. That's the big game changer for you. And also that they were so cooperative about the tenants moving out. Your average rent on the building is much better than some other buildings that you're going to find like that with one of those type of owners who've owned it for a really long time. They didn't feel the pressure to jack rents every time because they were making good money for what they had on the building, right? So many are in that scenario.
And realistically, what we do is, like, we love revitalizing buildings. Like, if we're going to take over a building, we put in the money to be able to make the units nice, for a nice place to people to live. We switched out the roof, we repaved the asphalt, we redoing the common areas. Like, when we go in and buy these buildings, we go in with the intention of really making like a nice place for people to live, and taking over buildings from people who didn't necessarily care about it allows us to capitalize on creating great assets for long term.
And what do you figure you'll put into this one? How much money in total?
Realistically, let's say we get through seven units at $30,000 a piece. We got a roof, we got asphalt, we got common areas. You are probably at least 400, at least.
So you're going to put 400. So you're going to be in for 2.8, figuring values at, you said 3, or who knows, potentially in time it could be worth even more. So you're going to have some money left in the deal, but it'll be a cash flowing deal from the looks of it.
And that's where most investors just need to be okay with the new reality. It's like you have to have money in deals. Some of the most successful investors that I know have extremely high-paying jobs, or they've found a way to make active income through a business.
And then they don't need to get it all out of their real estate. Yeah,
that's correct. It allows you to be more flexible. It allows you to do the right thing, to be able to create great assets and to hold them long-term instead of skipping corners.
For sure. Yeah, like, things have changed. That's why I said it's almost like everything that used to work doesn't work, because people could just, you could be severely challenged and not at all good at real estate and not analytical, and just buy a property and just have it go up in value and you win anyway. that type of investor isn't in the game anymore. So,
but I think that the average Canadian needing to understand this, it's never been more important than right now.
Yeah, be sophisticated. That's what I've been saying. You got to become sophisticated. Yeah.
You have to, because these are becoming legacy items, and we are very quickly seeing the majority of the population lose the ability to own real estate. And when the majority of the population loses the ability to own the most important asset that you can own, we start to have a serious problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, and I feel like it just leads to more socialist policies, because politics reflects the belief of the people, right? It reflects the morality and belief of the people. And if people just, like, in general, they don't own anything, then they're going to be more like, oh, well, government, since I don't own anything, I want the politician that will give me the most free stuff. So it actually, I really think it would be bad for Canada, because it will create a much more socialist mentality. Like, government, you the government that made all these problems, please now give me free things to fix my problems. Obviously not logical, but that's just, it's human nature. And I think that we just got to kind of see that. So what we do with that, I don't know. This is why I'm not super hot on Ontario for the long run, at least in like basic residential stuff. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunities. Of course, there's still an opportunity to buy in Ontario. You just got to kind of be prepared for those outcomes and know what your angle is and how you're going to handle that, and how you're going to, because there's lots of people, as you're talking about this, like lots of people who are going to make a lot of money in Ontario. Because they're going to know how to play that game. And the more people who don't want to deal with it, the other ones are going to become really specialists at dealing with it and make a lot of money because of it.
And that's what we're seeing. Just the concentration of knowledge right now is pooling to a handful of people, and those people are taking massive action towards it in this market. And it's just going to create a divide. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be fun dealing with a lot of the clients you deal with. You get to see a lot of the inner workings of these deals. Because they're just running them by you. And these are probably a lot of people who don't want to come on the podcast and talk about it. They don't want anyone to know.
The majority of people who are doing large stuff, they are the ones who have 3 Facebook followers and are just always creeping.
Yeah, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want everyone knowing. Yeah, it makes sense. Cool. Josh, where can people find you and reach you?
Sure, yeah. You can follow me on JFins. We are also on Instagram at FMT Mortgages. We actually have some exciting news. I will not share it here, but if you keep up on our socials, at the end of next month, we have a big announcement coming up. So stay tuned and check in with us there. Or my contact information, email, and phone number are going to be down below as well.
Okay, we'll make sure we have that and include that there. Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this. Anything else you want to share just before we sign off here?
No, I mean, keep doing the same thing, guys. Keep learning. As Andrew said at the start, this is a dynamic. Everything changes, and as markets change, how you acquire assets and how you go about purchasing real estate changes. So always keep up to date, keep informed, keep listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, trying to better yourself. It's the only way to be able to move forward in these types of markets.
For sure. All right. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure, Andrew. Take care.
Okay, talk soon.
And now a word from our sponsor, Control and Compound.
Here's how infinite banking works in under 60 seconds. You have to save your money somewhere. Well, we think the best place to save it is inside a cash value life insurance policy. You save some money in there, it grows tax-free for the rest of your life. Then an opportunity or emergency comes along. Let's say a few years down the road, you can buy a business, buy a property, buy an income-producing asset. You leverage the infinite banking policy, borrow against your asset, take advantage of the opportunity. But your money still stays in the infinite banking policy. You're not borrowing your money, you're borrowing the insurance company's money. So your money's in the policy, it's in the opportunity, and it's providing a death benefit. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. You get to retirement and you have this massive cash value life insurance. Leverage that tax-free, and you don't repay those loans. You sit on the beach and you spend that money tax-free every month. Doesn't show up on a tax return, and you leave your family a huge tax-free death benefit.
For more information, visit www.controlandcompound.com/Andrew Hines.